Section 4 of Music and Medicine by Sidney Licht. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 2, Philosophy and Psychology of Music, Part 2. 3. Other conditioning factors. In addition to the physical elements of music previously discussed, there are other factors which enter into the type of response of mind and body to music. Mention has been made above of the value of program notes. People who hear new music for the first time may or may not develop a visual or emotional response, but if prepared by descriptive writing, they may understand or at least enjoy the music more. Quote, program notes, oral comments, and the general setting of the presentation are important because they concentrate and reinforce the mood response. Indeed, it has been shown that in a verbal introduction offered before a composition is presented, what is said does not matter much, and that almost any kind of comment will enhance the listener's enjoyment if it serves to cue him into appropriate, effective states of mind. End quote. Music aids should take this finding seriously and preface the playing of musical selections with verbal commentary. Even popular dance music may be prefaced by remarks about the solo instrument featured or the personalities involved. With the exception of the effects of rhythm, all other reactions thus far cited have been largely psychologic. Before leaving the discussion of response, one bit of evidence demonstrating possible physiologic action will be presented. Gundlach studied the songs of 6 different American Indian tribes. Now, the language, customs, and music of neighboring European countries frequently have something in common, but the absence of the wheel in transportation made the scattered people of the Western Hemisphere strangers to each other. The speech and songs of the different Indian nations are entirely unrelated, yet the songs representing the same types of ceremonies show considerable agreement. From this, Gundlach concludes that, quote, music has some conventions grounded on a firm basis of physiologic structure and behavioral similarity of human beings, end quote. A. Live music. Most people will turn to the source of sound. Even the most phlegmatic will turn if the sound is sudden and loud enough. It is a protective mechanism because identification of the source may prevent personal injury. There is also a sense of satisfaction in the corroboration of the auditory and visual images. When the sound is musical, the desire to see its production is greatly increased. For those who cannot make music themselves, it is like watching a conjurer from behind. For musicians, it offers the opportunity of inspection, improvement, or criticism. One of the most important psychologic components of music is the physical presence of the music maker. About 20 years ago, a manufacturer produced piano player rolls which reproduced the manipulation of well-known artists so well that experts could not differentiate between the sounds produced on the piano by a live pianist and the automatic player. Yet, this method of reproduction was a failure financially. It had every quality of the live musician except the physical presence. We demand far less in quality of music from a live band than from a mechanical reproduction of band music. Groups of people who assemble to dance will pay relatively high prices for inexperienced players with a monotonous repertoire for the sake of having live music. The dancers may complain of the poor musical execution, but will suffer a return engagement in preference to the playing of recorded music. There are cinema stars whose singing voices are harsh to most ears, yet listeners will applaud them into an encore, not so much for the sake of a beautiful experience, but to prolong the human contact. We react not only to sound, but to the motions and very presence of music makers. We listen to people as well as their music. Live music stimulates, sustains, and focuses attention. It should be used as often as possible for patients. The live musician can get patients to listen to musical forms which would be entirely ignored otherwise. If musicians wish to spread the appreciation of good music and music appreciation, one method is to be found in personal appearances at hospitals. B. The human voice. Of all the sounds of given pitch and intensity, the one which best attracts and maintains interest is the human voice. We habitually turn to the human voice. Sometimes we do it as a matter of courtesy. Again, we may do it for better understanding or even out of curiosity. The spoken language is understood by far more people than is the so-called language of music. When words are set to music, they command greater attention than when they are spoken. They are usually compact and in rhyme. We strain to hear each word to gather the full meaning and humor or cleverness of the lyricist. Yet we willingly lower our literary standards when words are put to music. The verses of many songs sound vacuous and repetitious without accompaniment, but the words are made interesting by the melody, and the melody takes on additional meaning from the words. Vocal music has greater power to arouse a definite emotional response than has instrumental music. Rest results about equally from instrumental and vocal music. Songs with words are ideally suited for arousing patient interest. Community singing is the most valuable form of music for maximum group response. Listening. Violet Paget sent questionnaires to 150 people in different parts of the world to obtain a global sampling of reactions to music. From an analysis of their answers, she found, quote, 2 different modes of responding to music, each of which was claimed to be the only one in those in whom it was habitual. One may be called, quote, listening, end quote, to music, the other, quote, hearing, end quote, with lapses into merely overhearing it. Listening implied the most active attention. Hearing is a lesser degree of the same mental activity where active attention occurs in moments like islands continuously washed over by a shallow tide of other thoughts. End quote. This is very similar to Gurney's classification of musical perception as definite and indefinite. Vernon lists the varieties of response to indefinite listening as A. Reflex or physiological, soothing or stimulating. B. General euphoria. C. Stimulation of thought and wandering of attention. D. Emotional moods of interpretation of the so-called meaning of music. E. Dramatic visual images of daydreams. F. Awareness that sounds are going on, but no further response. G. Lapsing of this awareness into the margin of consciousness. He found reactions A and B among primitives and infants, and reactions C, F, and G among the untrained. Schoen found that response to music is related to the psychologic levels at which they occur, and to sensation, perception, and imagination. The sensorial response is physiologic and possessed by all. It is the source upon which all other musical development depends. It requires a minimum amount of mental effort, and its effects are within the easy reason of the intellectually inferior and superior alike. As a sensation, music is either pleasant or unpleasant. Training and experience may lead to higher types of response, depending upon individual desire and ability to develop musical taste and education. The next higher response is perceptual, and its distribution level adds excitement or repose. The highest level of response is imaginal. Quote, much of the music we hear we have heard before, and because of this fact, we have associated it with a host of memories with pleasant or unpleasant coloring. The hearer may not recall the exact time or occasion on which he heard the selection before, and yet he may have a group of images which are definitely referred to his own past. End quote. Meyer summarizes the appeal that music might have for listeners as 1. Emotional response. 2. Suggested associations. 3. Personification of a subject. 4. Its value as an object. 4. Musical taste. The selection of music for patients can be handled in many ways. The easiest and least reliable is to use the music best loved by the musician guiding the program. Such programming will undoubtedly meet the approval of some of the patients, but it is unlikely that it will meet with the approval of all. Non-psychiatric patients should be given the music they want. Much has been written concerning specific music for certain groups of patients. There has been considerable prejudice in favor of good music, that is, good in its relation to intellectual values. But music itself can be neither good nor bad. Its execution or appropriateness for the occasion or the individual may be open to question, but the answer must come from the patient. We must keep uppermost in our minds the goal of music for bedridden or chronically hospitalized patients. They look to music as a morale booster and a source of enjoyment. Most people have favorite songs, but the degree of desire for them or for any music will fluctuate with the time of day, the kind of day, and many other considerations. The taste of the patient will vary not only with age, training, nationality, and home background, but with such intrinsic and unfathomable things as personality and thinking habits. Quote, musical taste is a folkway, a convention which behaves exactly as do folkways in other realms of activity. Accompanying this taste is the conventional conscience, which dictates what is right and what is beautiful. It is more or less impervious to contradiction and is disturbed at the prospect of change. End quote. The music of any given composer does not change, but the audience will change as a result of the appearance of new forms of music and living. The works of the 18th century, with few exceptions, were loved by its contemporaries, but find a small audience today. The musical taste of an individual changes noticeably from childhood to maturity, but the change is gradual, and except for those studying music intensively, during any 1 year of life the change is hardly appreciable. Even established favorites will become less desirable to the individual. Quote, after a certain number of repetitions varying with both the founded experience of the listener and the complexity of the item, the enjoyment is diminished. One might here propose the hypothesis that the rate of ascent to popularity is directly in proportion to the rate of the decline, as illustrated by the sharp rise to popular acclaim of the ephemeral popular hits and their subsequent precipitous decline into oblivion. End quote. Among the many factors which sometimes have a great effect on musical taste, contemporary events are outstanding. During a war, the people welcome songs which sing of their prowess, impending victory, or derision of the enemy. Such songs become popular because of their literary rather than their musical content, but they affect taste indirectly, since the only test of taste lies in the songs to which people will freely listen. Soldiers pick up foreign songs and marching songs and bring them home as souvenirs and favorites. It is now well recognized how great and prolonged such an influence can be. Whatever the musical taste of the patient may be, regardless of how he came by it, it should be satisfied. As soon as an individual attains the status of being a patient, there is an immediate mental depression which may continue to increase if not checked. The patient may develop anxiety, fear, self-pity, or boredom. There may be sensory depression from pain, unpleasant sight, or disability. In addition to these saddening factors, there may be undesirable response to environment, personnel, and the monotony of medical or nursing routines. All efforts should be directed at substituting joyful experiences for saddening introspection. The formula for joy is very personal. Although most people will laugh at some comic situations, the response to music cannot be predicted except upon the basis of individual desire. The person who becomes a patient may not have a fundamental change in musical taste, but his appetite may be altered by variations in mood, and this is of prime importance. Quote, more people express a wish for music dynamically similar to the existing mood than for music of the opposite effect. The amount of enjoyment is slightly affected by the kind of mood change taking place." End quote. It is possible for sad music to be more enjoyable to those who are receptive to it than gay music. Nevertheless, other things being equal, gay music is apt to give a greater degree of pleasure to those who wish to hear it than sad music gives to its devotees. The enjoyment of music depends not only upon its pleasantness, but also upon its familiarity. This recognition may be one of identity or of idiom. Most people like popular music because they are familiar with its form or tempo, or because they can hum or name it. The musical taste of the patient can readily be determined by offering him a checklist with the names of 50 or more selections, including the entire gamut of musical forms. A general idea of the popularity of classical selections can be determined from the sales records of recordings and the frequency with which certain pieces are performed by the better symphonic orchestras. The popularity of contemporary offerings can be learned from surveys published in such magazines as Variety and Downbeat, or by listening to radio shows such as The Hit Parade. Musical taste is closely allied to performance. If chosen selections are played improperly or without regard to certain elementary considerations, the use of music will lose its value to the patient. A brief consideration must include the effects of arrangement, tempo, and volume with which the selections are played, since these have been seen to influence the effects of the selection. Many people, when asked to name their favorite music, will name a performer or a band rather than a specific piece because they have come to desire the characteristic style of the artist's preferred, and style in an orchestra is closely related to these factors. Some listeners prefer loud music, but it must be remembered that even though sound does not become painful until the level of 125 decibels is reached, there are some people for whom the painful level is much lower, and hypersensitivity to sound is an important source of irritation. Others may be disturbed by music which is too fast, which must be taken into consideration. The role of expectation plays an important part in taste. Most people who have been conditioned to expect the classic use of the scale and traditional harmony cannot find joy in the unusual tonal structure of the moderns as exemplified in Schoenberg or even Stravinsky. Hospitalization is not the proper period of life for indoctrination into the beauties of innovations. Musical taste is acquired and always relative, and is based, as Dizerens has pointed out, on the habit of hearing. An historical illustration of this is the evolution of the consonances. The Greeks regarded the octave as the only genuine consonants. In the 5th century, the 5th and 4th intervals were admitted to this classification. In the 11th century, the major third was accepted as such, but the minor third had to wait until the 12th century. In music, the habit of hearing is the law, and through it, the exception of yesterday becomes the rule of today. The best analysis of musical appetite can be found in the statement of St. Thomas Aquinas, "Bonum est in quod tendit appetitus." The good is that toward which the appetite tends. We repeat, there is no such thing as good music or bad music. Music may be played poorly, but the evaluation of the good in music is personal. Pleasure, and pleasure alone, is the proper purpose of art, said Walter Stickert. Musicians will do well to remember that since taste results from the gradual blending of emotion, experience, and education, it is better to enjoy wholeheartedly, quote, a waltz of Lahar than to be able to make a thematic analysis of a Beethoven sonata and yet remain unmoved by it. End quote. 5. Summary. For non-psychiatric patients, musical programming should be based upon patient requests. For stimulation, the important factors are rapid tempo, accentuated rhythm, and elevated volume. For sedation, slow tempo and reduced volume are indicated, as well as simple, recognizable melodies. Some discussion of the selection to follow is a valuable aid to the enjoyment of listening. Live musicians should be used as often as possible. End of section 4.